I'm Daz. Okay, so time to work on the Nivico, or the JVC. I'm just going to call it the JVC, it's easier for me. It looks like access through the top. This has 5 transistors for the amplifier and 1 for the arrays oscillator. But as I said, it's DC on the arrays head, so that's going to be a little bit noisier. There doesn't seem to be any equalisation switching for the 2 speeds that it does offer, which is 1 7/8 and 3.5. It's Agc record, that means automatic gain control. What that tends to use is a diode that rectifies the audio signal, charges a capacitor, and that capacitor is adjusting the biasing somewhere to adjust the gain of the circuit. So there's no manual control in this one. Automatic level control can be a blessing or a bit of a curse. It's not brilliant. It can, if you've got silence in between some music, the level will come up. It depends on what capacitors, etc. You take something like a professional UR machine, and that tends to have, you can switch between the 2, and there's 2 different speeds, because you ideally want a faster response with speech and a slower response with music, so it doesn't suddenly shoot up towards quiet passages in music. But mind you, a lot of the modern music I tend to listen to is so compressed I don't think you'd notice. But I think we'll see. But let's see if I can get into this machine. I've got a manual for this one, which is nice. So I've got a little bit of clue in what I'm doing. That'll make a change. This one appears to have a centrifugal motor. So that uses little weights on the motor to control the speed, so that makes it very difficult to adjust if the speed was to be wrong. It's nice to actually have the procedure for taking it apart, and then I just chuck the controls everywhere. So that's always good. So there's the head cover off and the knobs. Remove the 5 screws and detach top panel. Cool, that's nice, it's luxury this. Okay, so now we can see the mechanism in all its glory, and I've figured out something else I've been doing wrong as well, but never mind. Okay, so we have got some drive belts. There's one for the tape counter, which is quite loose, but still seems to be turning. And there's one for the fast forward and play, which is this one here. So here's the motor. Here's an idler wheel, which feels a bit on the stiff side. That connects up with this flywheel here, which is also the capstan, of course. And then there's a belt going round to the take-up reel, and there is a clutch between the bottom and the top. And this is also this wheel here, which comes into play during fast forward. What I've realised is fast forward has got to be held down first, and you see that wheel comes in, and what that's effectively doing is bypassing the clutch. So fast forward is now via this belt. This reel is fast forward. So if we go into play, you'll see the felt pads come in and push the tape against the heads, and the pinch wheel goes in. So we're driving from here to here to here, then via this belt and via the clutch for the take up, so that there's only a little bit of tension to take the tape up. You don't want too much tension, as it will cause the tape to ride on the pinch wheel. And in rewind, that's very simple. Basically the motor is touching the rewind spool, and that's got quite a bit of torque. But yeah, the rubber is a little bit hard in places on this. You can see that spool's pushed out of the way in playback, so it doesn't stay against it. So you're just relying on the back tension and the tape counter for your back tension. So yeah, that looks like a relatively simple mechanism. Again, it's just these rubber parts again. The rewind was quite good, so perhaps a bit of rubber reviver and a bit of clean up and I'll get away with that. But this pinch wheel definitely will be needing to be replaced, because that's pretty damn hard. Oh yeah. So rubber parts are always the problem on these tape recorders. It's interesting, it says to remove the 4 red screws, which are here, so I'll mark where they went. It says to remove this jack board first, but that doesn't seem right, because, well, there's a tape counter in the way, so I'm a bit puzzled by that. Never mind. Read the instructions, dummy. Yeah, apparently it says to push the jack board inwards, so it's bending now. So there we go. I've done it. Hey ho! So you sort of bend it. Oh, it's quite flexible, isn't it? I'm always frightened to do things like that when something this old. So now with a bit of luck, the whole thing will come out. Yes, apart from the wire to the speaker, but that is very conveniently been made long and is detachable from the speaker, so there we go. Oh yes, and there's a couple of leads going to the battery compartment, but they're on spade terminals as well, so that's quite convenient. Well, now we can see the base of the unit. I'm not quite sure where this sponge has come from, but it was just sitting there, so might be for the battery compartment because there's a couple of sponges there, so maybe that's what that was for. There's our connection. 9 volts this one. There's our speaker. Now I can just oh, something's fell off. I've got to be careful, but can we sit this here without causing damage? Probably not, but here's the chassis. I'm going to put this on the towel. So here's our chassis. Here's the mains transformer. Here's our centrifugally controlled motor. That's probably the main smoothing cap. It's these grey ones. Now they tend to be a little bit yuck. I haven't looked at the transistors yet, but there is a date code possibly on this capacitor, 20866 on that one. And I wouldn't mind saying there's one on here as well. Perhaps some of these controls are a clue as well. Now look at the grease on that. Ugh. It looks a bit yeah, yucky. So I've got mains fuse there. Usual thing with these things, loads of wires everywhere. You can see the inductor here for the bias oscillator. If I remember correctly on the circuit, there's an interstage transformer for that. That will be the capacitor for the bias oscillator, I suspect. Looks like it's a mica type one. Oh, there's a thermistor or 2 there. Just there. And I think that's the output stage. And there's the relay that switches over the battery. So yeah, interesting chassis. It's tone and volume control. So it's going to be a case of degrease and see what we can do with the rubber parts, I guess. Right, let's make a start. By the way, I think this is germanium transistors mostly, but I'm going to look them up later and see what we've got, but I think it's all germanium. Well, that's the original pinch wheel, and as you can see, it's cracked in a number of places. I found 2 spare ones I've got, and I think you can see the problem. This one is obviously too deep, and the hole's slightly too small, although I suppose you could drill it out hopefully. This one, the hole's too big. It's a little bit not wide enough. So, plus you'd need a sleeve in there to get the size right, so maybe I've got some more somewhere else. Well, I've removed the bracket from the capacitor and the bearing housing, so I might not take the flywheel right out. I might just clean it where it is situated. I don't think that's very in focus, but I think you can see where I am. I've taken the head off as well. Well, I'm gradually getting there with this. I've re-greased all this cam, pulled it out, re-greased it. These bearings here as well, this one and this one. Things certainly, this feels a lot better now. The grease in here, it's BSR grease I call it. You know, it was just completely gummed up. You can see from the mess I've got here anyway, but I'm just gradually working through it and trying to re-grease it. And one note about this main bearing is that there is a set of nylon washers there, and they're very easy to lose because they're clear, but I did manage to retrieve them all eventually. And then there's a little pip on the end of the bottom of the flywheel which contacts with this. But feels a lot more smoother now. I've got all the gunk out of that bearing. Just working on the fast forward lever here, and you can, well, just see how thick the grease is. It's just more treacle, because that wasn't pushing down very well, and I'm not surprised really. So all complete clean up and re-grease of that as well. Sometimes with a little bit of careful manipulation I get these levers off, because I don't really want to take these linkages and these nuts off if I can help it, because it then means you've got to get them back in the right position to operate everything. But there's just this and the record interlock mechanism I think that needs cleaning, and then I can concentrate on some other parts. Very interesting arrangement for bearings here. There's a lot of these little sleeves and they're used as bearings. You can see the grease now. Now I've removed that. It's a case of taking plenty of photographs, even though I've got a manual. I'm not that good with exploded diagrams, so I tend to like to take some photographs. And however many you take, you always end up not in one angle. Just taking the rear spool table off. There's a clutch on that. Interesting, between that and the tape counter. I just want to get at this bearing here next. Yes, again another one of those little sleeve bearings, and it also slides underneath this part of the chassis as well, so I have a little bit to clean. Now just cleaning the record mechanism. This little mechanism here is to stop you putting it in record when it's already in playback or rewind or something, so that's what that does. This little mechanism here. But look at the state of the thick grease on that. Done a bit of a sneak here and moved this bracket to the right a little bit. The spring's still attached at the bottom, but I've got enough I can lift this off. Yes. Well, the motor dropped out fairly easy. I marked which way it went, although I don't think it makes a lot of difference. So while I've got it out, I can see a gap there, so I can pull a shaft up and hopefully get some oil using my little thing. And also oil the rear bearing as well. Given how old this is, you want to try and lubricate the poor motor, I guess. Okay, when I started this video I said that this drive wheel was a little bit on the hard side, but then there's a good reason why. It's mostly metal. It's just a little bit rubber on the edge, which is probably why we're getting an okay grip. That's very interesting. There's just a little bit of light grease there for that to slide on, but you obviously don't want that getting on the rubber wheel. So things are looking good, but I've still got the problem to solve of the pinch wheel, getting a replacement pinch wheel. That's going to be my problem, I think. But yeah, I'm not quite sure why this bit of felt is on here. No idea. But I reckon a bit of rubber revisor, and that'll sort that out. Just running it up, still in parts, but let's put a load on this flywheel, and the motor is just about stalling. Yep, that's exactly what I want. So it got a good grip. I've used rubber reviver on the pink stuff. So cleaned all the surfaces that's mating at the moment. So I just need to finish this off and put everything back, and then I guess I'll work on the amplifier next. But certainly sounds very quiet. The rubber belt for the counter will need replacing, but this one for the take up seems fine. So yeah, you can see it moving when I stall it, so I think that's more than adequate for fast forward and take up. Rewind is still a little noisy, but I have cleaned the surface of this with very, very, very fine sandpaper, and it has quietened it a bit, and the grip's good now. That's fantastic. Look at that, stalling the motor. And the brake is good because that forms part of the brake, so yeah, that's quite satisfactory. This is the take-up spool, and there's the clutch, there's the tensioner, so there's just some felt or something there, and it just allows it to slip so that there's just a little bit of tension to take up on the take-up spool. So it doesn't want to be too tight, otherwise it'll pull on the pinch wheel and make the tape ride, but that feels okay. although I bet the manual specifies some sort of torque on this one. I'm just cleaning up the shaft to the front spool table with some IPA and getting the old grease off, or oil. It's gone very black, and then I'll clean the inside of this up if I can get this inside, and then just a little bit of light oil, that's all it needs. I've done mostly what I want to do mechanically now. I've replaced all the grease and all the levers, re-oiled the spool tables, grease where there was some, cleaned off the old grease and re-greased it, cams here. So my next move I think will be to recap this. The other thing I'm going to need to look at, there's only one last mechanical thing, and that's this felt pad for the brake. I feel that needs replacing, but I've had trouble finding the right type of felt to do this with. I've had problems with other machines where it's not quite the right type of felt, and I thought felt was felt, but well, no, it isn't, is it? I guess like most things. But yeah, as far as I know, it's still working. So the other thing is the pinch wheel. That is not going to be cheap to replace. I think it's probably going to cost me more than the machine is worth, but you know, it's a hobby, so I suppose I have to just swallow that. You know, people are making pinch wheels and things now, but my goodness, does it not come with a price bracket? The dink 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 we had in Rewind is because there is a little dink in this rubber wheel on the motor. It's where this has dug in for many years and has actually deformed it. I've tried some rubber revisor, but that hasn't fixed it, so the only other thing I might be able to do is this tyre. This might be a removable tyre, and I replace that, but at least we know why it goes donk 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 on Rewind now. Ooh, it looks like that more or less fits. Might need a washer or two, but that is a brand new pinch wheel. It's actually designed for a Grundig, but it actually looks like it might fit this deck. I'm going to find a screwdriver when I want one. Yeah, I could do with a washer or two, but helps if you reattach the spring for the pinch wheel. But yeah, that looks nice. Yeah, good. A lot of money, but at least it'll grip a lot better. A lot better than the old one, which is really just completely naffed. Actually, looking, the old one moves the same, so I don't think I need washers really at all. Time to start changing some capacitors, I feel. See how bad these are. They might be alright, but I suspect as this being in the 60s, these capacitors are not going to be fantastic. Probably changed value an awful lot, and they're probably quite leaky by now. This is where the fun begins. There was 3 screws holding down the circuit board, plus 2 on the heatsink underneath here. But now I'm just trying to work out how could I fold it over when there's cables coming this way, that way. Yeah. Don't you just love the way these things are designed? Oh, there's a whole pile of capacitors down there to get at. Oh. Well, I've sort of managed to flip the circuit board up so I can have a look. I'll just have to decide what I'm going to disconnect and not disconnect. Of course, you've got the head wires, the volume control wires, etc. Plenty of wires to keep you back. 0.5 electrolytics. So there's a heatsink. There must be the wire wound resistors, a couple of thermistors there, the looks of it. Bias oscillator. That must be a output transformer, I guess. Probably the splitter transformer. That's probably a choke. So yeah, interesting arrangement here. Looking at things carefully again, I reckon these are filters for the motor. I reckon that's the not the output transformer, the driver transformer, because not only does it drive the output pair, actually provides the voltage for the recording head as well. So the driver stage is what drives the head in record. Right, the recap is complete, and it was very awkward, principally because all the capacitors are marked positive, and of course all modern capacitors are marked negative. 20866, could this be the date code I've been looking for? 1966 maybe? I can't see any more codes like that. No. Some of the capacitors have doubled in value. One wire's fell off, but I knew where that went, so I just hope I've got all the electrolytics the wrong way around. If I haven't, it can have very, very strange effects. And the other thing was, I said to remove 3 screws from the top. Well, I put one back because it was actually what's holding the heatsink on. So my mistake. While I've got this out, I'm going to clean the record playback switch as well. And then perhaps I'll try it. Just hope it still works. Leaky capacitors, I guess the worst place for that to be would be in the automatic gain control, which I can't even spot now. Yes, germanium diodes right underneath the heatsink, which is an awkward place to put it, but well, look at this circuitry. It is really quite simple, but then, you know, like I say, we haven't got AC arrays, unfortunately, but there's the relay that switches over battery mains. Nice old silicon diodes. Are they silicon or are they germanium? I don't know. Could be either, I guess. Very hard to tell. There we go. Hopes I get it in the shop. Yeah, 69A. I wonder if they're silicon or if they're germanium. Let's just have a look at a few components. This is a 30 microfarad at 10 volts. It's now virtually double. The ESR is good. This one's a 10 at 10 volts. It's now 22. The ESR is still good. This one's a 30 and it's up to 45, so let's try this large 500 microfarad at 6 volts. 872, so that's gone up quite a lot as well. Well, none of them seem to have a really bad ESR, but their values have changed so much. Well, that's a relief. It still works. Okay. There isn't much grip on the roller to the capstan, but the capstan is still very dirty, and there's no way of adjusting it. Give it a clean and see what happens. Right, testing, 1 2 3, 1 2 3, testing, Nivico. The recording is quite low. It doesn't sound at the right level. It's quite low and it's quite distorted as well. So I didn't test this before I started work on this, and that was a bit of a mistake, but there might well be something wrong with the bias oscillator or the output level. Now it plays back very well, so that tells me that the electronics should be alright, but so we need to look at that. So in the tape recorder we've basically got 2 preamp transistors, a driver for the output transformer, put some laminations on it. So in playback, basically from head through the 2 transistor amp, necessary equalization through the driver. The output drives the 2 output transistors in push-pull, through a capacitor, decoupling capacitor of course, block the DC, and out through the speaker. So that's your playback path, quite simple. So when you're going to go into record, the microphone goes in place of the head, goes through the 2 transistor preamp through the driver, but there's an extra winding here on that driver transformer, and that's what drives the head. Also, some biases connected into this first transistor, so you've got an automatic gain control, so it actually reduces the base bias to reduce the gain of this stage, so you've got Agc. Also, you can switch on monitor, and it's for a 15 ohm resistor, because obviously we can't adjust the volume, they're all out of circuit, so you've got fixed volume monitor with this one. This is the output circuit for the head in record, so from that audio tap through a capacitor, which probably blocks the bias going back as well, through this resistor and this capacitor, which probably sets some of the emphasis. There's another capacitor there, and then that's the output winding of the bias oscillator, so that's connected in series, and then to the head. So what could be wrong? Bias oscillator's not right, this resistor's not right, one of the two, because that recording level is just far too low. I had the volume control nearly on full. Now monitoring this, because by the way this only works when you've got an auxiliary input. They've put a switch so that you can't put monitor on when you've got a microphone, because you get feedback, I guess, so that would be part of the problem, why they've done that. So I'm trying to think what could be the problem. Just botching myself up a patch lead because I was just using a double 3.5, and that's not good really. I think it was shortening one output of the phone, and I'm trying to check for distortion. Really ought to put my signal generator on it, but basically it's a couple of 220 ohm resistors on each output from the stereo jack, then through the screen cable and to the mono jack. So the 220 ohms make sure the 2 stereo outputs are not shorted, and it monorizes them properly. This is where I wish I had 1/8 of a watt resistors, because it's a bit tight, but the lid does go on. That will do for my tests. Well, one thing's obvious to me: I don't have enough level from my phone, because it's hard to hear with the automatic gain control on the camera, but as I bring this up, it isn't really auto gaining, so there isn't really enough input to it. Now the Aux input on this is done with a 100k resistor into a 470 ohm, which is across the mic input, which means you can only use this with a low impedance mic. So I might swap that 100k out so it's sensitive enough for a microphone, because that seems a bit ingenerous really. It's really looking for something like 1/2 volt, I think, really, but it's one way of finding out. I ought to put a tone in really and see what level it needs. Because what will happen is the output will start to level off, of course, because of the automatic gain control. Just looking at the output of the tape recorder, I have got a hum loop, but as you turn the output up, there's 100, 200, 300, 400. You now see it's Agc 600, 700, 800, 900 a volt. So it's not a particularly sensitive input, so you can now see it's now starting to clip at that level. But yeah, so you're alright up to about a volt. Much more than 1.5 volts. It's starting to look distinctly distorted. But yeah, you can see that the automatic gain control is effective at about 200, up over 200 millivolts. So probably my phone hasn't quite got enough output. Well, that doesn't look too bad, so I don't think the bias is too far out. Exchanged the input resistor from 100k to 47, and now, yeah, you can get a good recording level at about 150 millivolts now. So that's a lot better. That'll suit my phone better. Yeah, starting to distort now. I don't think changing the bias on the transistor is a particularly brilliant way of controlling the automatic gain control, so I guess you need to get it about right so the AGC is only just working on this machine. But right, let's try recording again. Yeah, no problem, I can reach the AGC point now. Not brilliant. Just looking at the bias voltage here, my goodness, what's that? 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, just over 100 volts peak to peak. That's quite large. There is audio on there, but you can hardly see the effect of it, which is where we want to be really, because bias tends to be getting towards 10 times the size of the audio signal. So yeah, that looks quite normal. Well, I'm thinking that the bias voltage is probably okay on this, being 100 volts. Good grief. My attention turns to the record circuit now. I have some voltages here, and do you know, I'm deeply suspicious about this base emitter voltage here. This is playback, and it actually calls for the emitter to be about 3 volts and about 0.22 above on the base. Now, collector also about 6. That's not far out, but on record mode that's with no audio, and with audio the bass has virtually gone to 0 to try and cut the audio off. I'm wondering if that first stage transistor is dodgy, and that's why we're not getting proper gain control, because I think we've got enough bias. I think the problem is that the recording level is too high. I think the automatic gain control is not functioning correctly. Let's have a look at this 2SB443, see what we've got. Well, it still looks like a transistor. Gain 155 seems a little bit high. Test current 2.5. Base emitter. It seems normal now it's on here. Very strange. Leakage 0.3. That's quite high when you've got a 12k emitter resistor and a 10k in the collector. So, interesting. Let's do something a little different. Yeah, I'm looking across the emitter collector. That's interesting, isn't it? Had a look in my book, and it's just an AC121 number 6, but all I could get is an AC1217 at the time. But perhaps we'll give that a go, see what that is like. See if it doesn't stick to the towel. Right, there you go. Oh, that's taken a while. 307. Ooh, that doesn't sound right either. Leakage is a bit high on that as well. That's not good, is it? I bought 2. I just hope the other one's better than that, because otherwise that is a complete waste of money. Oh no. Ooh, that's not good, is it? Oh, yeah. Okay, so stick the meter on it again. Well, it's a slightly different reading. It doesn't quite go with the leakage reading I saw, but I don't know. I've got a Russian audio transistor here, and as you can see, the gain isn't brilliant, but one thing I will note is the leakage current is excellent. I've been testing these two transistors by putting voltage through them, and the two together is 3 milliamp leakage at 10 volts, so I think I'm going to have to give up with that. This is the Agc circuit here. The main problem is that you really want the right gain in here. I was thinking about changing it to silicon, but I think that's going to be problematic. The biasing is fairly conventional when you're in the play mode. It's about 0.3 here, so that's not too bad. There is a very large emitter resistor, but it's bypassed at audio. That tends to give this quite a high input impedance, which is what you want really. What happens when you're in record is you've got a diode here that's fed from the audio amp, and so you're going to get a positive voltage here. That's going to be fed into this resistor here, and it's going to reduce the bias further because it's positive, the bias negative. So I think the problem is if you start mucking around with this biasing too much, you're going to change the recording level. You may have changed the attack and decay. So it's a bit of a minefield really. It's not really the transistor you want to be changing in a circuit that is actually the AGC. So I'm going to have a big think about this. I wonder if I could get a Russian transistor with a higher gain, or whether I try silicon and just see what happens. Well, it's several weeks later filming this. The 2SB443, I did manage to find my substitution book, and the gain is between 30 and 150. That's very widespread for the transistor, but I think they picked a high gain one. Anyway, to cut long story short, I've got some MP 21As here. I'm disappointed because the highest gain one I had was about 83, and they can have a gain up to 150. So, fitting that, the voltage is a lot closer to what it should be. It's still, the collector voltage is still a little bit high, but I'll play you the old recording compared to a new recording I've just made. That's the old recording. So a lot less distortion, so that's not a bad turnout, but as I said, I'm just disappointed having bought loads of transistors that I've just not ended up with one with a higher gain. An 83, I really think I need something nearer 100, but the other problem is the MPT21A has the case as a base, which means it's going to pick up hum, I'm pretty certain, even if I put the transistor well down onto the PCB, but it's a bit of a problem, anything with germanium's in now, I think, but anyway, it looks like the tape recorder is working a lot better than it was with the old leaky transistor. Leakage on this transistor is about 50-60 microamps, which is one hell of an improvement over what we had. So I might just go with this and call it a day, because sometimes you can just spend a lot of time trying to get it absolutely perfect, and I'll probably never use this to record, hardly ever, so just playback. So I think it's all a bit of a compromise. I'm going to be even older and greyer by the time I get half this stuff done. Also note now that the level of the monitor is quite sensible. Before it was excessively loud, so it tends to suggest that things are a lot more where they should be. Testing 1 2 3, testing 1 2 3, testing the Nivico TR541U with the supplied microphone speaking at a distance of about 4 to 5 inches. Let's see how this sounds. A lot better. Good. I feel like we're making some progress now. I've got to remember to switch that rubber wheel for rewind over. I've decided I can probably turn it upside down because the amount that's in contact with the spool is small, so it might get rid of the lump. So I'll do that as well. Well, I've come back to this 10 months later and I can't quite remember what I did last time, but 100 millivolts, 500, a volt, 1.3, 1.5, 0.6, 1.7. So now it's beginning to distort. So I think, yeah, the dynamic range is a little better than it was with the previous transistor. If I'm bunging 7 volts in now, it's getting a bit ridiculous, but I'm obviously clipping now. So it shows the Agc is not fantastic, even with a non-leaky transistor. So I'm a little disappointed at that, but this is not a hi-fi deck, is it? So I've got to be sensible in my expectations. Well, we're just on the reassembly road now. I have managed to bend this shaft apart slightly. I don't like doing it in case it was to snap, but I have successfully bent it out, so hopefully the volume control won't fall off now. So hopefully when we put it back together it'll still function. I'm just trying to clear up one or two little things now. These felt pads are just starting to fall off, so I'm just putting some glue on them. Attempt to using this scouring pad to make a new, ooh, that's crunchy, make a couple of new parts for here. And I think there's one on the head which goes on top on the head, but I don't know how I'll get on with that one. So with glue I'll get on with that. Thank you for watching the video about the Nivico or JVC TR541U. It's been a bit of a battle and big gaps in between. The latest problem was I thought I had another problem with the recorder, but it turns out that the problem was the head was completely clogged. And as you may notice on the spool, it says made in USA, so I'm guessing this may unfortunately be an Ampex tape, which some of them do suffer from sticky shreds, so that's a shame. But anyway, it's working now, and it's not a bad little machine. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.